Brendan Dassey trial transcript day 4, continuing on page 119. Attorney Fallon, thank you. The court, you're welcome. The court, be seated. We're set to proceed this afternoon. Before we do, ladies and gentlemen, I've been asked and have agreed to read this instruction to you. Closed captioned transcripts have been added to the audio tape that you're listening to. If you believe in listening to the audio concurrently while reading the closed captioned words, that there is a variation between the audio and the closed caption, you are to rely solely on the audio. All right, you may begin. Attorney Fallon, yes. Before we begin with part 2 of the interview, Detective, I wonder if you could answer a couple of questions and put things in perspective for us. First of all, on November 6th, this interview is indicated during the noon hour. There seems to be a fair amount of in and out of the car by yourself and Detective Baldwin. Can you explain to us what's going on? During the interview, I was conferring with Special Investigator Skorlinski from the Department of Justice, as he was also conferring with agents that were in the Manitowoc area at the Avery residence and the salvage yard. And at this time, on November 6th, how much did you know in terms of the advancement, as it were, of the investigative efforts? Not much more than what I knew the day before, and that was very minimal as well. All right, and what was that? Our initial request was for the assistance and trying to obtain information from witnesses that had last seen Teresa Halbach, which would have been the Avery family, or particularly Stephen Avery. And outside of that, we were made aware that Teresa Halbach's vehicle was found in the Avery salvage yard on that Saturday, as well as, I think, only that Sunday, that there was it was a Saturday, a burn barrel that had been some charred pieces of electronics that were found inside of it as well. I think that information was about the only information that we had outside of Teresa Halbach being missing. All right, and so were these entries and exits of the vehicle our efforts on the part of you and Detective Baldwin to learn more of the state of the investigation? Yes, it was more of so to help clarify information that we were either or receiving from Brendan or not hearing. All right, now there were one point here. There was a question that was asked of you by the defendant, Mr. Dassey, about did he do it? Where did that come from? I don't know. I mean, it came from Mr. Dassey, and it was kind of confusing along the idea that he talked about, do you think he raped her? And up until that point, there was never even anything mentioned about any type of sexual assault or homicide or kidnapping or anything other than Teresa Halbach being at the Avery property and missing. All right, very well. I think we'll continue with the presentation of the interview, wherein playing of the CD continues, wherein playing of CD ends, by Attorney Fallon. Detective O'Neill, where were you when the tape ends in terms of physically? Seated in the driver's side of my car. All right, and where was your vehicle? Had Brendan been returned yet to the family residence up in Crivets, or were you still on the roadside there? Still on the roadside, just getting to return him back to there. All right, and after the interview was completed, where was Brendan taken? Back to the cabin on the Avery property. All right, and do you know who provided transportation for him? I believe I did. All right. Do you know who was present at the Avery property when you dropped him off? I don't recall. All right. In terms of this investigation, did you have an opportunity to speak with a variety of family people up there? Yes, I did. Generally, then, just who was there during the days that you were assisting in this investigation? Charles Avery, Stephen Avery, his father, whose name escapes me, that he refers to as Grandpa, his grandmother, his brother Brian, and I believe that's all I could recall. All right, now, first of all, tell us generally about Mr. Dassey's demeanor during the course of your interview with him. Looks like, according to the tape, about an hour and 20 minutes total. I interview a lot of people, and Mr. Dassey's demeanor was different in that during conversation, he was almost to a point of being engaged when he wanted to be and disengaged when he didn't want to be, just as what I'm observing a lot today. All right. If it was something that we were talking about that he was okay to talk about, he was actively engaged. He'd tell you about it, bang, 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 and move on. When it came to specifics regarding Teresa Halbach, Stephen Avery, what happened on that day, he wasn't as engaged, and he went into a inner struggle physically. He'd sit there, head down, withdrawn, motionless. Answers would be muffled. Totally contrary to what he chose to be involved with or engaged with. It was his demeanor that I felt from all the years of training and experience I've had with dealing with people, an inner struggle, a conflict. He was hiding something. It was not going to be a 10-minute interview as to what he saw. There was something more. In speaking that, in terms of just generally the amount of information that you were able to obtain from Mr. Dassey, I mean, ordinarily, how much, if someone was freely to give that information, how long would this interview have taken? From what in totality he had told us or wanted us to believe, as far as his time in being there, seeing Teresa Halbach, seeing interaction between her and Stephen Avery, it should have taken us 10 minutes. All right, how long did the interview of the other brother last? Not long at all. He was in and out of the car with Agent Skorlinski way before Brendan. All right, now there was some discussion about him being choked up and sweating and things of that sort. Tell us about that. Well, physically, you know, he even mentioned about his eyes watering. I mean, we're all three sitting in the car. It's November. And of course, I got in and out of the car a lot. But he's in the back seat sweating like crazy. And I think even the other officer noticed that as well. His body posture, his body language, just as I'm sitting here with you today in the openness, I mean, this was just totally different. And, you know, from what I've seen in my experience, it was that would suggest to me that there's something there. Attorney Fallon. Your Honor, I believe we've marked that CD. Roberta, do you have that? The clerk, yes. Attorney Fallon. That's Exhibit 201? Yep. Attorney Fallon. We would move into Evidence Exhibit 201. If the court or counsel desires, we can provide a written transcript to accompany it and maybe make it 208A if there's a need. But otherwise, we would move into Evidence Exhibit 201 and tender the witness for cross. The court. Counsel, any objection other than that previously noted? Attorney Edelstein. As to the transcript, Your Honor, I would at this time subject to perhaps some agreed upon corrections. No objection to the disc itself. The court. All right. Attorney Fallon, that's fine. The court. Okay, it's received. You may cross. Cross-examination by Attorney Edelstein. Detective O'Neill, you spent about an hour and 20 minutes with Brendan during the course of this contact on the 6th of November, correct? I'd have to take a lot out of that from being in and out of the car, but in totality, myself, Detective Baldwin, that's correct. And Skorlinski was there as well? For about, I think, the last 5 minutes, if that was about right. All right. This had been some time back, right? November 6th. Of what year? 2005. All right, 2005. It's a while back, right? Yes. Before coming to testify today, did you have an opportunity to discuss with anyone your testimony to help you be prepared for this jury? I discussed with the attorneys that I read the transcripts, some of the points that they asked me about in the transcripts. On the way down here, I listened to both audio recordings. It's a 2-hour drive for me. Tried to bring myself up to speed, of course, because of the time and also other things and matters that we have going on in Marinette County. Yes. I'm sorry, what about Marinette? Other things that we have going on, other cases and so forth. So I try to refresh myself with the attorneys as well as my own records, the audios. I don't want to get confused now. On the way, are you talking about on the way down here, you talked with these attorneys about things happening in Marinette? No, outside of your question about if I had talked to anybody about what I was going to say today. Right? I mentioned I'd spoke to the attorneys today. Right. And then also I reviewed my notes and the audio recordings on the way down here. Did you speak with any of the other officers who were involved in the investigation in this particular case? I believe I spoke to Detective Baldwin. Did you and Baldwin come down together? No, sir. But you talked to Baldwin prior to testifying here today? Yes. Now, you knew that the girl's name, about whom everyone was concerned, was Teresa Halbach, right? Yes. And you knew that the information was that the last place she was seen was at the Avery salvage yard, is that right? That's how it was reported, yes. And you knew the date that she was last there, correct? Yes. Prior to speaking with Brendan, had you spoken with Stephen Avery? Yes. Charles Avery? Yes. The grandfather? Yes. Grandma? Yes. And that was there at the cabin, right? Yes. And that was actually the day before? For the most part, yes. What do you mean the most part? I spoke to them, Stephen Avery on Sunday. I believe I spoke to his dad on Sunday, his mom on Sunday as well. I mean, there were various people I spoke to on both dates. Okay, but you had been in and out of the cabin property a number of times over at least 2 days? On 2 occasions, yes. Okay, prior to talking with Brendan? Yes. Brendan wasn't the first one you talked to? Correct. And you were in contact with agents from DCI, right? On a sporadic basis, yes. Did you have daily contact over the course of the 2 days with Skorlinski? I spoke to him a couple times, maybe 4. How many times had you had personally met with Skorlinski before you spoke to Brendan? Twice. And where was that? I believe he came up on Saturday night, and I would have met him then, and then also on Sunday morning. Prior to stopping the Pontiac and talking with Brendan? Yes. And the two of you, along with others, including Baldwin, for example, you kind of laid the game plan out as far as who was going to talk with, to which of the boys, right? It was spontaneous, but we decided that we'd talk to them since we had the opportunity, yes. All right, well, the truth of the matter is you had the opportunity over at the cabin to talk to him if you wanted to, didn't you? No. And why was that? We were pretty busy and we just didn't get to him. You stopped the Pontiac on what day of the week? Sunday. Okay, and what time did you do your last interview on the day before, on Saturday? It definitely was sunset. It was a pretty important case, isn't it? Yes. I don't mean to give you a hard time, but you can work past sunset, can't you? You live in the county, you know your way around. Well, what kind of a case are you referring to at that point that I was dealing with it, sir? Well, on that Saturday night, you're working with what you understand to be certainly at a very minimum, a missing persons case, right? To my understanding and clarity, that day it was a missing person case, yes. And was it important to make contact with individuals who may have had the last contact with this girl? Correct. That's why you were there on Saturday? Yes. And you talked with a bunch of people that Saturday, but you left out what you're telling the jury. You left out about sunset? I believe so, yes. Did you inquire on that Saturday as to the whereabouts of Brendan when you were at the Avery property? I'm sure I knew he was there. Pardon me? I'm sure I knew he was there. So what stopped you from talking to him on Saturday? Because up until the point of where we got on Sunday, there was no need to talk to him. So you say up to a point on Sunday. What happened between Saturday evening and Sunday? About 12 hours. Well, can you be a little more specific? What happened that caused you, besides the lapse of 12 hours time, that you deemed it important at this point to talk with Brendan? Brendan was not the last person reported to see Teresa Halbach. Let me ask you this. I'm trying to answer your question. Okay, go ahead. Okay, we talked to various people in the family. We spoke to family members and basically gave an order of importance, and Brendan came up on Sunday. When did you exactly learn that the bus driver reported passing that area at roughly 3:45 on the 31st? You knew that on Saturday, didn't you? No, I did not. When did you learn it? On Sunday, when Agent Skorlinski and I conferred outside the vehicle when Brendan was being interviewed. Now, what was your purpose in going over there on Sunday? I believe the purpose was the search warrants for the vehicles. Okay. Besides learning was Brendan already in your police vehicle when you learned from Skorlinski that this information had been developed about the bus driver? Yes. Okay. And during the course of this hour and 20 minutes, do you know when that was? I may, but I want to back up just 2 questions before. No, I'd rather you answer my question. The government will get their chance. I think it was about a third of the way into the interview. I think it was pretty obvious during the audio part where I got out of the vehicle, came back, and asked him the question about how many people were on the bus and the bus driver and so forth.